we need to talk. You and me need to talk. We all need to talk about whistleblowing. I'm Marion, engineering manager at Fin. And today, I will be doing most of the talking. But my hope is that after this talk, you will like to do some talking too. And maybe you start some conversation with your family, your friends, and even maybe in your workplace. So I'm gonna suggest some topic of conversation during this talk to help you. But before we start, how much do you know about whistleblowing? Are you a novice? You have read the newspaper and you have seen big cases and big scandals? Or maybe you are trained, maybe you got taught at work what you should report and how to do it. Or maybe you are experienced. You have blown the whistle, or you have helped someone to blow the whistle. Or maybe you are an expert, and that would mean that you work with it on a daily basis. I am not an expert, and I am not working in any agencies that work with whistleblowing in Norway. That would be Arbeidstilsynet, Finanstilsynet, Datatilsynet, a lot of tilsynet, and Likestilling og Diskrimineringsombudet. I have talked to them though a couple of times. I have had their phone number on my phone, and it almost felt like we were colleagues at some point. So yes, I have blown the whistle, but I usually don't talk about it so much. It's mostly something that people hide. Let's put it this way, it's not something that you go around and just say, yes, I have blown the whistle, I'm so proud of it. No, you don't do that. But I'm not ashamed either. And I have thought a lot about this, and I really think that it's about time that we talk about it and make it easier for people to be able to speak up. And that's why I'm here. So whistleblowing is reporting another person unethical behavior to a third party in the context of work. And I say illegal, unethical, because everything that is under the Norwegian law, or any law in your country, is illegal. But there are other things, like things that are in your workplace policy, or just social norm, that are considered unethical, and you might still have to act on it. So it's often about corruption or misconduct. There are other things as well. Whistleblowing is a bit more than that. It's about ethics. It's about expressing your values and your belief. So when you whistleblow about misconduct, it's because you believe in fairness and equality. When you whistleblow about corruption, it's because you believe in honesty and justice. But it's also expected. People expect you, society expects you to blow the whistle. At least that's what they say. And then you have a legal dimension. It is a right in Norway under Arbeidsmiljøloven and in Europe in a directive from 2019. But it is also a duty. It's a duty when it comes to people. So when it comes to people, psychological or physical safety, it's actually a duty to report. And that would be in case of danger for health or life, or harassment and discrimination. You don't whistleblow because it's your duty. You whistleblow because you believe in some values, but knowing that the law is supporting you, it helps a bit. And it's also regulated for your workplace. So your workplace should investigate and take action, and then they should also protect you from retaliation. In addition, they should have done some groundwork in the workplace, some prevention. I'm pretty sure that most of you work with products in a way. So for the rest of this talk, just imagine that whistleblowing is a product, and we are going to talk about it as a product. And I hope you know how to make good products. So let me tell you about the value proposition of that product. So the current value proposition is feel good 5 minutes for having done the right thing for society. In return, get long-lasting negative personal consequences. It does not sell. But if we talk about our product, well, it has a 48% adoption rate. And as I mentioned, there is a duty element in it, so a compulsory element. So it's nothing to be proud of. I mean, if we compare it to paying taxes, which is also a product, imagine the population deciding that 48% agree to pay taxes, for example. And the efficiency, well, the efficiency is 33%. If you bought a product that works only 1 out of 3 times, what would you do? Well, me, I will call customer service, ask for my money back, and return the product. So it shouldn't be a surprise that the user experience is pretty poor. 15% of satisfied customer, not great. So if whistleblowing was a product, it would be a failure. And we could make fun of that at a fuck-up night or any other kind of event where we make fun of total failures. If it was not for a product that is actually here to save lives, money, and reputation. So if whistleblowing was a product, you would have to decide if you want to fix it. That would be the first question. Is it worth fixing? And then you could decide, then you will have to fix it properly. So you will have to make it adopted and you will have to make it efficient. Otherwise, you can just retire that product. So let's see if it's worth fixing. To answer that question, you will have to try to understand what are we trying to solve? What is the job to be done? And then what are the alternatives? What are other people using instead of that product? What is the current market size? And is the market growing or shrinking? So what is the job to be done? The job to be done is that a user can easily report, so a user that is either a witness or a victim, can easily report unethical behavior happening in the workplace so that it can be stopped and also be compliant with the regulation. In addition, it should make you feel good. You should be proud or at least feel good about having done the right thing. In terms of alternative, well, you could do nothing. I mean, we could all live with this. We have lived with it so long. But what it means is that you are just waiting for problems to get bigger and bigger and bigger and hoping that at some point people will get caught, because eventually some will be caught. Or you could be thinking that, okay, if we bet a lot on prevention, we could eradicate unethical behavior. Well, that's a possibility, but it has not worked so far either. So the alternatives are not really viable. But let's talk about the market size. So I'm gonna ask you, we're gonna play a game, and I'm gonna ask you how much in percentage do you think in the workforce in Norway is exposed as a victim or as a witness to unethical behavior in the last 12 months. I have data from 2018. So, who think that it's below 5%? You can raise your hand if you think it's below 5%. Not many takers. Well, that's actually true because 5% of the workforce is bullied in the workplace, and that data from Tekna in 2021. So now, do you think it's above 10%? Do you think it's below 10%? Anyone think it's below 10%? So I have data from SSB in 2019. 5% of the workforce is subject to violence. In addition, you will have to also look at harassment. And actually, 4% of the workforce is subject to sexual harassment. So that's one part of the harassment in the workplace. And don't think those numbers are shrinking. For example, here, for sexual harassment, it was 3% in 2000 and 2009, and for violence, it was also 1 percentage point below in 2009. So it has to be higher than that. So is it below 15%? No, it's not below 15% either. Norway has a very low corruption perception index. It's fourth lowest in the world, with a score of 85 out of 100, so it's pretty good. But if you read the newspaper, you know that there is also corruption in Norway. So the right answer is 16%. 16% of the workforce have witnessed or been exposed to unethical behavior in the last 12 months. And that was in 2018. 16%, let's talk about people. 16%, it's 1 in 7 and 1 in 6. I don't know how many people do you know, but I'm pretty sure you know more than 7 people. So how many people do you think have had to deal with that? Before I had to blow the whistle, I knew one person. Well, I thought I knew one person, because when you start talking, people start sharing and you start knowing. And I knew more than that. And now I know even more. So to put it in perspective, we are talking about the workplace. So to put it in perspective, 27% of the workers in Norway have changed job in the last 2 years. So you have 27% in 2 years and 16% in 1 year. It's not that different. Statistically speaking, it is actually more likely that you will have to decide if you want to blow the whistle than if you want to change jobs. That makes you realize things. Is the market growing or shrinking? So we have 16% of the workforce that is witness or victim of unethical behavior, but maybe it could disappear, right? Well, unfortunately, if you think about the history of the working environment, 200 years ago we had slavery, and data privacy is only a 40-year-old concept. The Me Too movement is pretty young, and right now everyone wants to do diversity, but not everyone is ready for the inclusion part. So I can't be certain, but if you ask me, I think the market is growing. So I guess we could all agree that we can at least invest a little bit and see if we can make it adapted and fix it properly. So to make it adapted, well, you need people to use your product. So how are users knowing about the product? Is there awareness and knowledge about how to use that product? Then we will look at the adoption rate and the main barrier for product adoption. Do you know how to whistleblow? That's a very strange question. And it's probably not something that you have learned at school. I don't know about you and your school. I went to school in France, so not here. But I have a 6-year-old, and at school, he's actually getting a course about whistleblowing. They don't call it whistleblowing in the context of school, but he's told that if he's bullied, or if he sees someone being bullied, he has to talk to an adult. That's whistleblowing. So they also insist on the fact that it's the same responsibility if you are a victim or if you are a witness to do it. So first grader, they get a course and they are given very clear instruction on what should be reported and how to report it. Did you? Has someone gotten a course about what to report and how to report? A couple? Good. Very good. Well, it's not the majority. If people don't know what they should report, it puts them in a difficult situation. It means that you let people judge with their gut feeling and their understanding of the law. And I'm pretty sure that everyone has a law degree here, right? So it's going to lead to a big variation in what is reported. It's also a very good strategy if you want to avoid things to be reported. You don't tell people that they should report and what to report. They don't report it. You don't have a problem. It's like going to the doctor or deciding not to go to the doctor because, well, if you went to the doctor, he will tell you you have a problem. So, yeah. So when 52% have not talked about what unethical behavior is and what should be reported, it is concerning. It puts everyone at risk. So I'm gonna try to teach you, not in many details, but at least I'm gonna give you some pointers. So there is different type of behavior you can report. It could be individual behavior, group behavior, or company behavior. And then you have 6 different areas. So the first one will be danger to the environment, violation of environmental laws. So you could have overfishing, oil leakage, and polluting rivers. I took examples that are a little bit more Norwegian, but you have different things in Europe as well. Danger for life or health. Not too long ago, there was a lot of concern about the health of elderly patients in nursing homes all across Europe. That would be an example. And then you have unsafe working environments, and it could be physical, like falls or falling objects, chemical exposure, fire or electrical hazard, these kind of things. And then it could be psychological. And that's where we have harassment and discrimination. So all the type of harassment and all the type of discrimination. It could also be abuse of authority. And I'm pretty sure that everyone here has heard about Snowden, who reported the NSA and for making permanent record of a lot of personal information and communication in the US. Then you will have breach of personal data. Facebook has had many cases making data from users public on forums, for example. And lastly, corruption. So in corruption, someone is trying to get rich, and it could be just basically stealing, but it could be also using their power or information to get personal advantages and benefits, like insider trading in finance. So it's different behavior, but they always have 3 things in common and 3 dimensions. The first one would be the seriousness, and the seriousness will answer the question, how bad is it? And the second dimension is the frequency, and it will answer the question, how often did that happen? And the third one will be about the scope, how many people got affected. So we are at NDC. I thought that would make a code. A couple of lines, not too many, but it's quite simple. You take those 3 dimensions and then you compare it with the threshold. And if you are above the threshold, well, you whistleblow. And if you are below, I would still try to raise some concern because something that looks like unethical is happening, right? And you might want to check it out. But if it's below, at least I will document it, because if it happens again, or the scope and the frequency might increase, and then the result could be different. But there is a bias, and the bias in this formula is about the information that you have access to. Because you should never think that what you know is all there is. It could some other people could have witnessed, other people could have been victims. So I think it's quite important to report early and raise some concern when you see something, because you are not supposed to investigate. So you are not supposed to go around and ask, have you witnessed something or not? Your workplace is supposed to investigate. Another big issue is my threshold. It shouldn't be my threshold, and it shouldn't be your threshold. It should be given by the law and agreed upon with your workplace. It should be probably something that is discussed, what is acceptable and not at work. And you could discuss that quite early in your relationship with your employer. Maybe even in your contract, because you should be given the opportunity to decide if you want to work on a certain level of protection or not. If there is a zero tolerance policy, that's nice, but what does it mean? So let's get personal. I'm going to tell you my story. Well, not all of it, not too many details, just enough so that you understand what happened. But just a warning, it's gonna be very boring. And it's gonna be very boring because there is nothing extraordinary about that story. It just follows a norm. And if it follows a norm, it's probably what could happen to you if you were in the same similar situation. So it took me 3 events to blow the whistle. In my defense, the first time was only 3 months after I joined. And I was insecure. And I was also trying to fit in. And I was in a collaboration mode. I don't know how when you go to work, in which kind of state of mind you are, but me, I tried to be in a collaboration mode. So I did not report it the first time. And why I didn't is because of the relationships. I mean, people tell you when you go to work, like, you can be smart, you can be efficient, you can be good at your job, but if you don't have a network and relationships, you won't succeed. Another thing that people tell you every day when you go to work is that, well, it's allowed to make mistakes. People should be allowed to make mistakes, and I agree with that. Except that some mistakes shouldn't be allowed. So that should be discussed and that should be agreed upon. So I didn't do it the first time. And I didn't do it the second time either. So what happened there is that the next day I got an explanation. What happened was never supposed to have happened and will never happen again. And I trusted. But then the third time though, I reported. So it can take a bit of time to recognize unethical behavior. And it can take a bit of time to recognize that it shouldn't be tolerated, especially if there is no courses and no guidelines. So when you have decided to report, you actually need to do it, and you will have to think about who should you report it to and how. So for the who, you have 3 options, and that would be any leader in your organization, so internally, or it could be one of the controlling agencies I mentioned earlier, or you could do it publicly and go to the press. Well, there is some constraints before you could do that, but that's also an option. And so if you don't want to do it internally, you could talk to any leader or HR or HMS specialist. There is a lot of people that can help you. And then anonymously or not, that's all right. You have the right to be anonymous, and that should be allowed. The difference would be that you might not get enough information after on the development of the investigation, but it's all right. So then you have to report. And me, I tried to report several times. So the first time, I went a normal way. And then the second time, I used an internal portal. Companies should have portal for you to whistleblow anonymously. The problem, and you are software engineers, so maybe you can fix it, is that the type of case I wanted to report, there was no option to report it in that software. So I didn't. And then I had to find someone else. Things shouldn't be too easy, right? It should be difficult to report, as much difficult as possible, right? Well, I'm not the only one who has to report things several times. It's quite usual. So, back to our product. So we see that the knowledge about how and when to report and how to use this product is not very widespread. And I believe that if we talked about whistleblowing, unethical behavior, limits, early reporting, roles prevention, as well as whistleblowers' rights, tools and contacts, we could decrease the number of cases, and they could be less severe in terms of scope and frequency, and they would be more reported. So people don't know when and how to use the product, but maybe it's intuitive enough. I mean, nobody got a course on how to use an iPhone, right? So maybe if the product is very intuitive, it should be enough. So let's see. Do people whistleblow? What do you think? The majority of people, because 50% means the majority, don't whistleblow. They should, but they don't. They have been victim or witness, and they choose not to. It indicates that we are failing at fighting unethical behavior in the workplace. In my case, I was not the only one who could have reported it. I did not know that, of course, not until the third event. And I was not the only one coming forward either. We were two. But others did not, for different reasons. When I look at this timeline, I see two things. The first thing I see is that if I had reporting things on the first event, I could have prevented stuff to not happen. But I also see that if someone else had been talking, I wouldn't be talking about this today. So, adoption, 48%. What are the main barriers to product adoption? Well, if you want to know that, you have to ask people, and you hope that they will tell you the truth. So, tell me. Pick up your phone and go on Slido, and we're gonna do a little Slido exercise. Just put as many reasons as you think for why people don't whistleblow. A lot of fear. A lot of fear and a lot of risks. I also see embarrassment, and that's also something, the fear of how people will see you. Yeah, many good answers here. But I will tell you, I have to charge my PC. Okay, no. All right, I will give you the answer that I've gotten from a survey in Norway. and we'll see if you have guessed the same thing. So I took the 4 top answers, and the first one is not my responsibility. We really need to talk. I have not asked you what you thought about first graders being asked to report bullying, even though they are not the victim. I think it's because it protects all the children, like it makes it a safer environment. But also, at some point, someone has realized that the victim might not be the best positioned to actually report it. There is a lot of things that happen that makes that victim maybe not the right person to do it. So they are trying to spread the responsibility and hope that it will work. And me, I'm wondering, is it normal to expect more from a 6-year-old than from adult, more in terms of action and empathy? Yeah. So in fact, 1 out of 10 does not feel like it is their responsibility to whistleblow. Not taking responsibility, especially when there are other people around, is a well-known psychological phenomenon. It is called the bystander effect. The bystander effect results in the non-intervention when in the presence of others. And it could be because they think that that's the other person's responsibility to act, or they are uncertain, and then they rely on other person to take the decision. And the effect would be even bigger if a leader, formal or not, is present. You will feel that the leader that is in charge should deal with it. So the bystander effect is one of the way a group influences your thinking and your action. You should wisely who you surround you with. In the workplace, the bystander effect is a challenge when it comes to people, and that would be in case of danger for life or health, harassment and discrimination. That should ring some bell with the law. Non-intervention is also a choice. You can choose to intervene or you can choose not to. You just have to live with the consequences. And let's talk about the consequences. When it comes to misconduct, you are the one person who decides if a victim is going to be the first one or the last one. You decide if the line should be drawn. Another thing we should talk more about is that we all take a risk when we whistleblow. And that risk means different things to different people. There too, privileges play a role. And as I've said, the victim might not be the one that is the best position to speak up. So we all need to survive. And for that, we need to fulfill some physiological needs. And that would be food, warmth, water, and shelter. And we also need sleep. When we survive one day, we need to survive a little bit longer. And then we need safety and security. And when that's in place, you can look for something else. You can look for connection. And that would be love and belonging. And then above that, you have esteem and self-respect. And finally, self-fulfillment, being the best version of yourself. And when we talk about what is at play when we whistleblow, it's work, right? Everybody was afraid of work. That came up a lot of times, and I also felt it. So what is the role of work in the environment? Well, your earnings provide you with your comfort. That would be the 2 first elements. And then we have seen that throughout the pandemic, the role of work is also very social. So it's a big threat to your well-being. So when you whistleblow, you are privileging integrity over the rest. And not everyone can do that. So I think that in the tech community, we are quite privileged because there is not enough people to fill up all the positions in Norway, and probably not in the world anyway. so we can take a bit more risk. Another thing that we should talk about is who are the people usually ending up being victims and the risks they are taking compared to witnesses that are deciding not to intervene. So to account for that, I amended the code, I changed the first line, and when it comes to people, their life and their working environment, it is never too early to blow the whistle. It is better to have a false positive than having a bigger case. It's everyone's responsibility to blow the whistle. To not feel responsible is a big barrier to the product adoption. And to break that barrier, you could talk about groupthink and how a group affects your behavior and the way you think. You could also talk about privileges, and not only as how it prevents people to get the same opportunity, but also on how it prevents people to claim their own right to safety. And finally, talk about consequences and accountability. And I believe it will raise our adoption rate. The next reason why people do not want to whistleblow is because of their loyalty. Loyalty is a value and a feeling. And in the context of work, loyalty means supporting. And I get that, normal. But I'm a bit more doubtful when it comes to allegiance. I don't know what you hear or what you think about when you think about allegiance. But me, I think about the mafia and I think about a cult. And I don't think that those two things should be associated with work. And last time I checked in my contract, there was no mention of me having to kiss a ring before I go to work every morning. And if you have that in yours, I would run. So, whistleblowing is about value and is about complying to your value system. And we all have different values and we rank them in different order. And we use them without even realizing it. It is easier to function. You just take a decision without realizing it. And it leads to less decision fatigue. So when something unethical happens, it's very quickly evaluated in your brain, and then you act or not, depending on your values. So if I ask you right now how you rank those values and what do you put on top, it could be very different than this scale. You could put loyalty on top, or justice on top, or honesty on top, or fairness on top, or equality, or very many values. And the ranking is actually quite important, because if you put loyalty above fairness, it makes you less likely to whistleblow. It is proven, there has been studies around it. So it's quite important to talk about value and what they mean to you, to your identity, and your actions. So 1 in 10 won't whistleblow because they don't want to be a snitch. And when they mean colleague, they snitch a colleague, well, they actually mean a leader. 80% of the time, it is about a leader. So we are really in the allegiance here. So in practice, it means that if the person or the group that is behaving unethically as someone inside that group that is close to you or a powerful relationship, then you won't whistleblow because it's better for you to go along, to get along. Obviously, you shouldn't do that. So we should talk about loyalty in the context of work and what it means to people and what people should be loyal to. When you have loyalty to people, or you also have loyalty to purpose. I mean, an organization has a purpose, and you can be loyal to that purpose and supporting that purpose, but it doesn't mean that you have to support people doing unethical things. You also have a loyalty to the victims and society. Another barrier to the product adoption is the feeling of betrayal. And this can be countered by talking about loyalty to purpose versus people, and talking about value and what they mean for your actions. If people understood their value better, maybe they will act differently. Next on the list of the reasons for people not whistleblowing is ignorance. 27%. So it's a bit more than 1 in 4 people do not know about the regulation. And that's just a fact. And I only have one question. Whose fault is that? I moved to Norway 15 years ago, and I moved here for work. So the first thing I read before I moved and signed my contract was Arbeidsmiljøloven, so that's the working environment laws in Norway. And granted, it's not the most entertaining read. I probably had to read it several times in several goes to understand everything that was there. But have you read it? No. Well, not many people read it, but you can put it on your bedside table. It's good for insomnia, and it's also good for getting to know about your rights and your duties. So, just a tip. The second biggest barrier is ignorance, and there is not much you can do about ignorance except informing people. And that can be done many places. It can be done in their contract, in a code of conduct, onboarding session, regular trainings, or at their graduation ceremony if you think that's the right place. So informing people is a very simple way to increase the adoption rate. But let's talk about the main reason. And most of you have mentioned it, the fear of consequences. What can you lose? To be honest, before I blow the whistle, I thought that my network would shrink a little bit and that there will be a bad atmosphere for a while. But I did not think there will be any bigger consequences, really. I was quite optimistic. But, yeah. 44% of people do not whistleblow because they are afraid of the consequences it will have for them. What I find even more worrisome, actually, is that 35% have witnessed that it actually happened. So if you have seen around you people being sanctioned, it is very hard to think that it won't happen to you. So for your own safety, I would consider changing jobs before it happens to you. Because there is a law that is supposed to protect you from retaliation, but it's not that efficient. In Norway, depending on the study, you find out that 1 in 5 has actually experienced very negative consequences. So most of the whistleblowers have experienced negative consequences, but 1 in 5 will pay a hefty price. And that price can be quite high. It ranges from people losing some task, 30%, as the most common way of retaliation, to being fired, and people experiencing a range of social consequences and being bullied. So I took some real examples from Norway. This is a case from this year. So the whistleblower was asked to cover evidence and lie to the police by her leader. He was drinking at a party, and later that night he got a car accident. And as you may know, drunk driving is not really allowed, and it can cost you more than your driving license. It can cost you your job and your reputation. So she refused and blew the whistle, and in return, she got bullied into changing jobs. And that's a quote from her. I can no longer withstand that burden or feel it on my own body anymore. So being badly treated in an investigation process can cause both psychological and physical pain. It may not be worth to continue to fight. Here we have the heaviest case of this year so far. It is a story of a whistleblower who was asked to recollect unregistered firearms from a top leader in the Oslo police. The whistleblower reported it twice, the first time in 2015 and the second time in 2016. And in return, he got harassed by colleagues and management, ended up on sick leave for 2 years, and was later paid off to resign. Today, he is unfit for work. This whistleblower did it twice. The first time was about corruption. And after a reorg, It was the only one from management who was redundant. Then he struggled to find a new job, and then in 2018, he did it again. It was a harassment case. He was not the victim, he was just a witness. And in return, he got demoted. Those cases can feel that they are something that cannot happen to you or me, and it is very reassuring to put a lot of distance between those people and you. If you had asked me before, I would have told you that, nah, this is surreal, this is unrealistic, this is unthinkable. The consequences are way too big, and why are we punishing people that are trying to do the right thing in the first place? So it really feels that it is far away from you, and that you will never have to deal with that personally. Well, I had to change job for my own well-being. I don't know if you have noticed the trend of people posting a picture before and after they change job. There's a lot of pictures around. And the before picture is someone that is sad and tired and maybe doesn't look that healthy. And then the after picture is someone who is like smiling and, you know, maybe they are tan and wearing a little bit more less formal work outfits. And they maybe take their phone call from the Maldives or something. So I don't have a picture, and I could have used Photoshop, right? We can all do that. But I have data. I have data from my heart, and more specifically, my heart rhythm. So you probably know that stress makes your heart beat faster. You probably have experienced it. What you may not know is that your heart rate variability varies a lot with stress. So when you have a lot of stress over time, you will have a lower heart rate variability because you are in a fight or flight mode. So low variability, it's bad. High variability, it's good. It means that you are more relaxed. So we all have a different baseline, but what is important is how it varies. So you have the baseline depends on your genetics, gender, general health, and age. And over time, it will decrease. You cannot do anything, you are aging, that decreases. So it will decrease about 10 milliseconds for every 5 years, at least until you are 45. After that, it decreases a bit slower. So I don't have data from the whole process. That would have been maybe even more interesting. And I have data at the end when I already had quit my job. So it's probably not the lowest point. But what it shows is that my after picture would be the one of someone 7 years younger after I change jobs. That's the toll that it takes on you. What it also shows is that it's not that you just change jobs and yeah, you go, you are fine. It takes some time to get back up. But I guess I'm privileged. I have experienced how it feels to get younger as time goes by. I'm not sure you have done that. So what happened? Well, feelings happened. And it's pretty normal to experience doubt and self-doubt in the first phase. Like, should you report, should you not? Are people going to trust you or not, believe you or not? But what happened in the second phase, though, is very dependent on your workplace. And for me, the consequences was feeling lonely and segregated, and there was fear, stress, anxiety. And finally came revulsion. Revulsion is a strong feeling of disgust. I don't know if you have experienced it. For me, it was the first time. And the way I can describe it is that your body is telling you that you are not supposed to be here. It's a very strong feeling. And feelings, they turn into aches and pains. You have probably experienced that when you are tensed or stressed, you get tense in your shoulder, your neck, your back. But when you get fear and anxiety, you get into a constant alert state. Your brain is half of the time monitoring if there is any danger around you. And that leads to insomnia, which leads to exhaustion. Yeah, it's a bad circle. And then you have, I don't know about you, but stress for me caused also some stomach pain. And that also kind of led to this nausea that I experienced with the revulsion. But it's possible to be in the 15%. 15% of whistleblowers only experience positive consequences. Some people are pretty lucky, or maybe they are just better at choosing a good workplace. To be clear, I do think that unethical behavior could happen anywhere, but the difference is how it's going to be treated. The difference is in the culture that have been built, and that makes a big difference. What would happen if we made whistleblowing simple and consequence-free? Well, my hypothesis is that people will come forward. We have talked about school. When a child reports bullying, he's not bullied by the adults. He's taken care of. The bullying hopefully stops. And maybe he gets a star sticker, for good behavior. Another example is reporting people who seem to have lost the control of their vehicle. Only 40% of drunk drivers with more than 1 per thousand of alcohol in their blood are stopped by police control. The rest, 60%, are caught after a call from the public or because they are involved in an accident. What it tells me is that people care. You don't want to have drunk drivers because it can kill people. The person can kill himself, but it can also kill people. And in the workplace, you don't want people behaving unethically either. It puts everyone at risk. So when it's consequence-free, people call the police, they call the hotline, and they report. But people prefer not to suffer negative consequences. And that's very understandable. So if there is only one thing you can fix to fix whistleblowing, it would be, how do you want to treat people who come forward? Do you want to treat them as a problem, or do you want to treat the problem that they bring to light? Do you want to make them an example to follow, or to be avoided? So if we took a big bet and said that it's possible to make this product adopted, we still have to make it efficient. And that's something that you should discuss as well. What do you expect from the treatment of cases that are brought to light? Darkness? Some people do not even get their case investigated. And finally, less than half of the cases are treated by someone who is assessed impartial. But things are starting to change. This is an article from this summer in July. A school director was fired because he did not follow up properly on a case. And as the title says, it doesn't happen often. So that cases that are not treated or badly treated have had very little consequences so far. So in your workplace, you should definitely talk about your expectation on the process and impartiality. And you should build a speak-up culture. You should try to make whistleblowing efficient. It is another big bet, but imagine workplaces are making whistleblowing efficient. Then you would just have to relaunch the product. So what do you think would happen if we relaunch whistleblowing? Well, we have run an experiment in Norway. This year, the Norwegian armed forces were forced to make whistleblowing efficient by the press. NRK put to light that the treatment of cases, especially when a leader was at fault, they were not really well treated. I'm not sure if there is any leader in the room today, but imagine you are in that chair. Imagine how it feels to have to relaunch whistleblowing in front of everyone. So if you are a leader, I would suggest a little backcasting exercise or pre-mortem. and think, how did I end up in that chair? What did I do or did not do? Which culture did I build or did not build? Which value I have had or not? What have I done 3 months, 6 months, and a year ago so that I end up here? But the results, they were amazing. I mean, if you make a big marketing campaign, I mean, amazing, 850% increase in reported cases. If I could move the the product adoption rate of any product by 850%, that would call for celebration. There would be many cakes. So when people believe whistleblowing is efficient, it has an effect. People report and speak up. So you need to talk about whistleblowing so that we move away from the norm that is not that bright toward a situation where whistleblowing is an efficient way of fighting unethical behavior in the workplace by being a consequence-free system for whistleblowers. I'm not naive, not anymore. I do not think that you will eradicate unethical behavior from the workplace, but I think the number of cases can be reduced by being clear on what is acceptable or not and doing some prevention. I also believe that the cases would be more reported if we talked about whistleblowing and normalized it. If it was not a stigma, people would come forward. And we really need to talk about what we expect about the treatment of cases. If you are in a place where you have witnessed retaliation on whistleblowers, I would either start talking to change that or change jobs before it happens to you. So now I have given you many facts and figures and a couple of stories to reflect on, and I hope you see the need to speak. Are you ready? Yeah. All right. I made a whistleblowing icebreaker game, you know. You can print it, you can cut it. Next team building event, you can talk about it. That's one thing. That's all the topics we have talked about, and there are many more. You can add your own. But it's also the first chapter, because we need to talk about whistleblowing is the first step, because you need to make it possible for people to whistleblow. Because I cannot ask you to whistleblow if it's going to be hell for you. But you can fix the value proposition first, and then you can whistleblow. And then I have another talk, which is more about what you should do in that case. And as a sneak peek and a good piece of advice, have both a mental health plan ready and an exit strategy ready before you do it. And for that talk, I made some cards. So if you want to pick one up, there are some over there and some here. And that will give you the top priorities that you will have on your top of your mind before you whistleblow. So here you also have more information, some readings about good sources, and you can also contact me by email or on LinkedIn. Talking about LinkedIn, I will probably post later today that, yay, that was amazing. I'm very happy to have been able to talk to you about whistleblowing, and I think that's the first step for making it a better society. Yeah, that was all from me. Thank you for listening. And now you can talk.